President Assad has been accused of deliberately targeting hospitals in Syria as an act of war in breach of every single convention imaginable. Tonight, a British volunteer in Aleppo gives us an exclusive insight into what it's like to try and work in one of them.
Boiling hot right now. We've just seen a little girl being brought in. Thankfully, another small injury. But it's always distressing to see children.
Also on News at 10 tonight. Dawn of the RoboCop era. The new anti-terror squad looks frightening, which is perhaps partly the point, but what difference might it make in a crisis?
Leave your bags behind! Jump and fly! Jump and fly!
Panic on board the plane that crash-landed in Dubai, yet everyone escaped before fire broke out. UKIP in chaos as the front-runner for the leadership and Nigel Farage's choice is ruled out. And China is likely to pull off another impressive medal haul in Rio, but at what price? With children as young as 4 hot-housed through the toughest of training regimes.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. Behind the summer headlines on Brexit, the ensuing political turmoil, not to mention terrorism in Europe, the war in Syria has ground relentlessly on, claiming lives and futures. We haven't been able to report on it as much as the scale of the carnage frankly merits, because of course places like Aleppo, now surrounded by President Assad's forces, are very difficult and dangerous to get into. Tonight, though, by carefully building the trusts of volunteers risking their lives, we have obtained exclusive pictures from inside a hospital on the edge of the city. It goes without saying that the staff there display extraordinary bravery in just turning up for work. But as one of them said, who else would help the sick and the injured? We are doctors. Our mission is humanitarian. We do not fear death or airstrikes.
As the war around Aleppo continues, this is a rare glimpse of one of the few hospitals close to the besieged part of the city which has not been hit, with underground wards to escape the bombing. Tox, a British aid volunteer, has given News at 10 a vivid portrait of the horror and bravery endured by people and doctors here.
You're going to get to see what it's like to be in a real working hospital here in Syria, how under-resourced we are, what life's like, what some of these heroes that we call doctors actually go through. The majority of the casualties in Hospital X, and most of the hospitals here in Syria are women and children.
The hospital is close to the eastern part of Aleppo, which is completely cut off. Many here have been injured in ongoing airstrikes by the Syrian government and their Russian allies. An elderly man has been brought in with a critical serious abdominal injury in an alleged cluster bomb attack which killed his son.
So they're saying that they need to rush him to A&E for operation straight away, and they need to open his stomach up because he's got internal bleeding. It's a very serious injury, and he's high risk because of his age.
His condition was so bad that he had to be transported to the Turkish border, as he could not be treated by any hospital in Aleppo. We learnt later that he fell into a coma. From an elderly man to a 1-year-old girl, the victims span all ages. The windows of Shifa's home were blown in by a bomb blast, and she was cut as she crawled across the glass.
Okay, so it's boiling hot right now. We've just seen a little girl being brought in. Thankfully, another small injury. But it's always distressing to see children.
This young boy, Mahmoud, is lucky to be alive. An airstrike close to his home caused the ceiling to collapse on him. Again and again, Tox describes serious injuries that can't be treated because of a lack of supplies and equipment. He's been brought in with what could be a serious head injury, yet there is no scanning equipment, only the most basic X-ray, with the X-ray plate having to be held up by Mahmoud's father.
That is really, really heartbreaking because how can you tell the extent of the injury?
Tox shows a former NHS ambulance donated by a British charity.
This was ex-NHS. Look. NHS.co.uk. For all of those people that say that these ambulances are not being put to use, this is where they're being used, and we need more because we're losing them every single day.
But the NHS ambulances arrive without critically needed equipment.
When they come from the UK, they're stripped out. They don't have the equipment that we need. This man, he's had a very, very serious operation. He should be on a ventilator right now. He should be having assisted breathing. There should be many pieces of equipment in case he goes into cardiac arrest.
Tox asks one of the doctors why he continues to stay when hospitals like this one are being targeted.
من سيساعد المرضى؟ من سيساعد الجرحى؟ نحن جئنا نحن من هنا. نحن أطباء، مهنتنا إنسانية.
ولا تخوف من الموت؟
لا نخاف من الموت ولا من القصف.
It is physically and emotionally draining work in searing heat, with little or no time to rest. And then suddenly it starts again,
There's been a chlorine attack not far from here.
with reports of another attack using chlorine gas.
So we're just getting ready to evacuate.
But eventually another hospital receives the wounded from the attack, and the evacuation is called off. Another example of the extreme daily crises faced by hospitals in Aleppo and across Syria.
And Raghi is here with me now. Is it true to say they are deliberately targeting hospitals, and if so, why?
I think there's no doubt, not just from Aleppo, but from series of cities and towns across Syria over this 5-year war, that hospitals and medical facilities are being targeted. Why? It's almost brilliant in its methodical cruelty, because if you're in a civil war, people will stay in a region. If they can, they'll survive bombing, they'll be able to trade food and water and other supplies. But when medical facilities are bombed, there's nothing else you can do but leave. If your child is wounded, if my father or aunt is wounded in Aleppo, you've got no choice but to leave. And so fighters also have no chance to leave. So by bombing hospitals, you depopulate a whole area, you deny a guerrilla movement from hiding amongst the civilian population. So it's no doubt in my mind that it is, and in the minds of most human rights organizations this evening, Physicians for Human Rights in New York have said that this has been the worst week for hospitals in and around Aleppo because it's a systematic policy to depopulate areas and win it over effectively.
As you say, it's not really the easiest thing to think about, but thank you very much indeed for now. There is something slightly unnerving about the new detachment of armed police, which is now on patrol in London, but then that is no doubt part of the point. If you've seen the pictures, you'll know they are more Robocop than Dixon of Dock Green, if you're old enough to remember either of those. They even come with a motorbike as standard in order to get to violent incidents quickly. They've been put in place because of the terrorist attacks in France and Germany, but training more officers and deploying them in the other parts of the UK could take a few years.
Police chiefs say a terror attack is a question of when, not if. Today, they told us what next. The numbers of firearms officers like these will be boosted by 600, and a special round-the-clock squad, including these officers, will increase threefold, ready to react at any time of day.
We're out with the police as they patrol the Thames. They're scouring for fresh threats, but they also know that London's waterways represent one of the quickest ways of getting to any terror attack in the capital. Police chiefs have said that that terror attack is highly likely. Should it happen, these officers will be among the first on the scene.
In total, 600 additional firearms officers will join the Met's anti-terror patrols in London. They'll carry a range of weapons, including semi-automatic guns, handguns, tasers and shotguns. And alongside the squad on the Thames, special fast response units will ride high-speed motorbikes, slicing through city traffic.
We've seen what's happened in Western Europe. The threat level is higher. Over the last few days, we've seen attacks in Germany, France, Belgium. It'd be really silly to believe it could never happen here. We can't give a 100% guarantee to stop it.
Armed police were on the streets in France, but still terrorists struck in Nice with a lorry and killed a priest in Normandy. Today, sources said the guns given to the new squad were more powerful and direct, taking on the crude and deadly terrorist weaponry. But how quickly will the new force be up and running?
Well, I think it's telling, isn't it, that since the government has announced this uplift of 1,500 officers, we've actually seen a decrease of 8 officers in the past 12 months. It's going to take time for us to get this uplift done. And I think best case scenario, it's probably going to take the next 2 years.
And for others, the money is being spent on the wrong thing.
The best option for us is to make sure our communities are willing to report suspicious behaviour, are willing to actually tell us about those people that are becoming radicalised, because once it gets into the point of police officers with firearms, it's too late really. We're going to have a disaster. It's just how many casualties we suffer.
Britain has a long tradition of keeping most of her officers unarmed. Recent polling has shown growing discomfort at this new show of strength. But these armed officers will be a small proportion deployed at strategic sites. The police have judged shock and awe may keep the public on their toes and would-be attackers back on their heels. Allegra Stratton, News at 10.
When you see what's left of a plane which crashed at Dubai International Airport today, it's hard to imagine that anyone got out alive. Yet all 300 passengers and crew did exactly that. The Emirates airliner landed hard on its undercarriage after some kind of failure of the landing gear. Everyone on board, including 24 Britons, managed to get out before the Boeing 777 filled with flames. A firefighter on the runway was killed, though. It was, incidentally, Emirates' first serious accident.
After skidding along the runway at Dubai International Airport, flight EK 521 burst into flames. Passengers in other planes watched in horror.
Are there people in that plane?
As thick black smoke billowed from the Emirates jet. Inside the plane there was panic as passengers struggled to the emergency exits. Some tried to collect bags and belongings, only adding to the confusion. Despite the speed at which fire engulfed the Boeing 777, all 300 passengers and crew escaped, some with minor injuries.
While landing, I think the engine or something burned. So the smoke was coming inside, so immediately they asked us to evacuate. So we have escaped from the emergency exit.
This is one of the world's busiest international airports. Air traffic control recorded urging planes on the tarmac to keep moving. Emirates later confirmed a firefighter, Jassim Essa al-Balushi, was killed trying to put out the flames. Why the plane crash landed is now being investigated. Some witnesses say there were problems with its landing gear on the final approach. Whatever the cause, it is clear this could have been far, far worse for those on board. Duncan Golostani, News at 10.
Now, Nigel Farage was always going to be a hard act to follow as leader of UKIP, and that has certainly proved the case for the man who was, until today, the front runner, not to mention his own personal choice. The MEP, Stephen Woolfe, has been stopped from standing. Why? Because he submitted his application an enormous 17 minutes after the deadline. If that sounds like the kind of petty bureaucratic nonsense UKIP supporters often say they detest, then you may not be surprised to hear that many people in the party are deeply unhappy at this turn of events tonight. Indeed, the infighting, already considerable, might be about to get a lot worse.
He has been the face of UKIP for 10 years. His mission to take Britain out of the European Union now seemingly unstoppable. But could his party be about to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory?
We've got our country back!
Bitter infighting has erupted after his heir apparent, Stephen Woolfe, was barred from standing by the party's NEC because his application was late. A technicality, he insists, seized on by his enemies and all very damaging for the party's image.
Well, I wanted to use this particular campaign where we showed all the different talents of UKIP to the public to say, look, this is a party that's growing up, that we're no longer going to be arguing like school children in a playground, and that we could have a proper debate about it. What has happened with the National Executive Committee? It has shown that there is deep divisions up there, there's a lot of splits, and I think that's not going to go down well with the public.
6 candidates have made it onto the ballot: Bill Etheridge, Diane James, Liz Jones, Jonathan Arnott, Lisa Duffy and Philip Broughton. A bit odd to exclude the front runner.
I always think it's odd to describe a candidate as being the most popular candidate. That's what you have an election to determine, and of course that is what should happen. And if for whatever reason a candidate is ruled ineligible, you can't say, well, that candidate would have won then, you know.
I'm really disappointed Stephen's not on the ballot. It would have been great to have a contest with him and to hopefully go on and beat him. But actually the NEC set some very clear criteria that we all had to meet. The NEC have taken the decision and have chosen for Stephen not to go on the ballot paper.
For now, Diane James looks like the favourite. She came close to becoming UKIP's first elected MP when she narrowly lost a by-election in Eastleigh in 2013. MEP for South East England since 2014, she's the party's spokesperson on justice and home affairs. She's outspoken, some might say gaffe-prone, last year saying she admired President Putin for being a very strong leader. Controversy was the hallmark of this man's time at the top. Now the controversy is all about choosing a successor. His legacy, a divided party, unsure of where it goes next. Libby Vina, News at 10, Westminster.
Political party in chaos. I think all you can say is that it's catching. Moving swiftly on. If there is a point to so-called watchdogs like Ofgem, which keeps an eye on energy companies, then it is, of course, to get the best deal for consumers. Ofgem did grasp the nettle today over prepaid meters with a cap on what companies can charge. And that is quite a big deal because 4 million households, often those who've struggled with bills, pay that way. But it won't bring any caps on variable rate tariffs, relying once again on canny consumers to find the best deal.
The power to switch energy supplier is in your hands.
Over the years, there have been repeated attempts to get consumers to flex their muscles. Hundreds of pounds can be saved if you move energy supplier, and yet so many of us don't. Today, the regulator promised change that will drive down bills.
I think these reforms will make the energy market much more competitive, and I think that will fix the problem.
You believe that people act rationally, that they search out the cheapest deals. Often people don't, and you are failing to protect those people.
I don't agree with that. We are definitely going to protect 4 million ppm customers directly. We are going to empower all other customers, as happens in every other market in the economy.
PPM customer, prepayment meter. Ofgem is capping the amount of money companies can charge people like Danny Coakley, who pay in advance. For everyone else, there'll be yet more encouragement to shop around.
The price is so high, and with you having to use so much gas and electric just to stay warm when it is really cold in the winter, there has been times you just had to make the difference, had to make the choice between heating or eating.
Ofgem first examined competition in the energy market in 2008. Since then, it's promoted switching, fined the big six energy companies more than £200 million for treating customers badly, and forced them to publish more information about their prices. There are signs of progress. Last week, British Gas revealed it lost 400,000 customers in the first half of this year. But 90% of households still get their energy from the big six suppliers, even though they tend to be the most expensive.
The next Labour government will freeze gas and electricity prices.
3 years ago, Ed Miliband accused the big six of ripping off their customers. He promised to give the regulator the power to cut bills. It's not a power Ofgem has or says it needs, and critics believe the big six have got off lightly.
I think they're sitting back and pretty happy about the remedies. I think they invested a lot in the process to make sure the outcomes are what they wanted. And in our view, the CMA did not go nearly far enough.
Ofgem believes the big six have exploited their customers' unwillingness or inability to switch. The hope is a sudden rush of people power will force them to behave better and cut their prices. Joel Hills, News at 10.
And if you fancy following Ofgem's advice and switching your energy supplier for a cheaper deal, then there is some straightforward advice over on our website, which might be a good starting point. A little bit of financial history could be on the cards tomorrow if, as expected, the Bank of England cuts its main interest rate from 0.5%, where it's been for the past 7 years, believe it or not, to a likely 0.25%. The relevant bank committee has been meeting today. So will it be record low rates at high noon tomorrow when it makes its announcement?
It hasn't been a great few weeks for the UK economy.
And another key indicator out today suggests that a slowdown or even a downturn is now on the cards. Here at the Bank of England, in a room that has barely changed in 250 years, a council of 9 are meeting to try and figure out what they can do to help stimulate the economy. But the reality is that the tools at their disposal may well not make a significant difference. So who are the 7 men and 2 women who are making this decision? 5 are from within the Bank of England, the Governor, his deputies and the bank's chief economist. The others are independent.
The big problem that the bank has is that they don't have a huge amount of room for manoeuvre without doing some fairly unusual, extraordinary, drastic things.
This North London plumbing company is expecting them to announce a cut in interest rates, but worries that the effect will be a mere trickle.
Well, on the one hand, it's good if homeowners have got more income because they've got cheaper borrowing to be able to spend money on their homes. That's really good for us because they've got the money to refurb and to do their bathrooms and their kitchens. But if there's a certain amount of uncertainty and they're worried that this isn't going to stick or there's something else that's going to happen next month and they're going to sit on their money, then, you know, they're not spending the money on refurbishing their homes.
Interest rate cuts are the most likely tool the Bank of England will use, from 0.5% down to 0.25%. But as rates are already at an unprecedented low, the effect may be minimal. Emergency measures such as quantitative easing, the pumping of more money into the economy, or the expansion of the funding for lending scheme that helps small and medium-sized businesses borrow are also on the table. But will these be effective?
It could be that given the uncertainties that we have at the moment, companies may not actually want more money to invest, at least in the short term.
Even if the Bank of England does announce extraordinary and drastic steps at midday tomorrow, it's unlikely that these can fix the economy on their own. It's clear that the government also now needs to act, and time is ticking. Narina Hertz, News at 10.
There has been a bit of competition among Britain's Olympic athletes even before the Games begin on Friday for the honour of carrying the national flag. Now we know it will be Andy Murray, and more than fair enough, you may say. Of course, there is another small matter to be resolved in Rio. How many of the Russian athletes patiently waiting in their hotels will, in the end, be allowed to compete? Lord Coe, the president of World Athletics, told us today international sports bodies should not be judged right now over that particular mess, but by the end of the year.
For the International Olympic Committee, Friday's opening ceremony probably can't come quickly enough. This then, a comforting sight as the torch finally reaches Rio. The Russia doping shambles still dominates discussions here. So what does the IAAF president make of it? Seb Coe's federation banned the Russian team, which included many clean athletes. Has everyone else then dodged their responsibilities?
I think it's very easy to say that there is a wholesale failure. There isn't, and actually.
But we're 2 days before the games, and they're athletes.
I think you're if I may say so, I think you're asking 2 very different questions. Yes, it would have been better not to be 2 days away from an opening ceremony, but I don't think that is the same as saying that right across the board, the anti-doping structures we have failed everybody. They haven't.
Do you think sport in general, and I suppose I include you in this as well, has a collective responsibility for the mess we are in at the moment?
We're not going to be judged over the next few days about what we do here. You know, the games will take place, sport will kick in. Our judgment will be what we do collectively between the end of the games and the end of the year.
The sport did get underway this afternoon, and those in the eye of the storm here hope that will prompt the conversation to change. Behind the scenes, though, the blame game among sports leaders will undoubtedly continue, as will the anxiety for Russian athletes, as those judging their right to compete work flat out, with one eye on the clock, counting down to Friday's opening ceremony. On Friday, Andy Murray has been chosen to carry the British flag. He said today, to lead out Team GB will be an incredible honour, the biggest in sport. The privilege of being the flag bearer is a moment I will remember for the rest of my life. And he's not short of support within the British team.
He's absolutely lovely. I'm so happy to hear that somebody so humble and so successful at the same time is our flag bearer. He'll definitely do us proud.
Rio has faced many challenges getting this far, and of course the Olympics has many faults. But very soon they will combine to provide memories that will last a lifetime. Steve Scott, News at 10, Rio de Janeiro.
Well, at the last Olympics in London, Team GB came third in the medals table behind the US and China, of course. China has only, in fact, competed regularly in the Summer Olympics since 1984, but in the 8 games since, as you can see, it has progressively won more and more medals, finishing top of the medal table in its home games in Beijing and slipping, as we've said, only to second in London. Now, it's true that China has a big and indeed huge population, but just how does it keep doing so incredibly well? To find out, our China correspondent Debbie Edward went to one elite sports school in eastern China where children as young as 4 are put through tough training regimes and where failure is frowned upon.
For up to 10 hours a day, these young girls and boys are put through regimented training routines that are designed to make them Olympic champions. This school in Hangzhou, one of several sports schools in China, where children as young as 4 are stretched to the limit in the pursuit of an acquired dream. Many have been plucked from rural villages, moving away from their family with the promise of sporting glory. Others have their progress watched by eager parents, willing their child to succeed.
It's good for her bodybuilding. She started from nursery school and has been training for 4 years now.
China has rejected criticism of its intense coaching methods. These kind of techniques have been condemned as archaic and cruel. Parallels are often drawn with the military. But the headmaster of this school says there's a price for success.
No hard work, no gain. It's different from other jobs. It requires sweat and blood to become outstanding.
There are almost 500,000 Chinese children being trained in these elite academies, and only 10% will ever make it to national or Olympic level.
With so many students competing for so few places on the Olympic team, the chances of these boys and girls realising their dream are very small. Those who don't will have sacrificed their childhood for a talent that wasn't quite good enough.
Jiang Shangwu was once bound for the Olympics. Now he's homeless and sells bracelets in the Beijing subway. An injury forced him to retire when he was just 18.
I was recruited when I was 6 years old and trained like a professional. I have no education, no job skills. We should be treated like those leaving the army and get some sort of support.
China has thousands of former athletes like Yang coping with a shattered Olympic dream. But still, every year, hundreds more enter a schooling system where only gold is good enough. Debbie Edward, News at 10, Hangzhou.
What do we know? But that doesn't feel quite right. Somehow, does it? Anyway, finally, there is always that temptation when you hear about a big lottery win to wish, as the slogan used to go, it could be you, and feel pretty jealous, let's face it. But as we found out more today about Sonia Davis and her family, who won Friday's Euro Millions draw, it was hard not to feel especially happy for them. She was in America recovering from tumour surgery when she found out it had been successful and was feeling pretty lucky. So she phoned home to her daughters in Monmouthshire to ask them to get a ticket. Working on the theory that mother knows best, an unarguable theory, they did what they were told, making the family £61 million richer. There you are. No arguing with mother, ever. It's just time now for a quick look at what might be making the news tomorrow. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and the MP Owen Smith, who's standing against him, will be taking part in the first leadership debate in Cardiff. And the International Olympic Committee is due to say tomorrow, finally, which Russian athletes will be taking part in the Games and which won't. They can't leave it any longer because the Games will have started. Join me again tomorrow. Until then, good night, and thank you very much indeed for watching.